The old barn stood far away from the main house, near the edge of the open fields. Its wood was dark and rough, shaped by rain, sun, and long years of silence. The roof bent slightly in the middle, and the doors were closed tight with age. People in the nearby town often spoke about it in low voices. They said nobody had opened that barn in 50 years, and they said it like a warning. The land now belonged to a man named Mark. He was quiet and practical, someone who liked clear answers. When he inherited the land from his uncle, he also inherited many unanswered questions. His uncle had lived a private life and never spoke much about the past. Mark accepted the land with respect, but the barn made him uneasy. Every morning, Mark walked his fields, checking fences and soil. Everything felt normal until his eyes rested on the barn. It seemed to watch the land instead of resting on it. Even birds avoided landing on its roof. Mark asked the neighbors about it, but they all said the same thing. The barn had been sealed for decades, and nobody knew what was inside. To help manage the land, Mark hired a cowboy named Tom. Tom was simple in nature, strong in build, and calm in spirit. He had worked on many ranches and had seen old places before. When Mark mentioned the barn, Tom listened without interrupting. He did not smile or show fear. He only looked toward the distant structure with quiet interest. Mark told Tom that his uncle had ordered everyone to stay away from the barn. No repairs, no cleaning, no questions. After his uncle passed, the order seemed to remain in the air. Mark admitted that he wanted to know the truth but did not know how to face it. Tom understood that feeling well. He believed that land remembered everything done on it. Buildings too. He said that hiding something for too long often made it heavier, not safer. Mark did not answer, but he felt relief hearing those words. Later that afternoon, Tom walked toward the barn alone. The sun was warm and the sky was clear, yet the ground near the barn felt cooler. Grass grew thin around it, and weeds bent in strange directions. Tom noticed deep marks on the wooden doors. They looked like scratches, old but strong, made by something that once pushed hard. Tom placed his hand on the door. The wood was rough and cold under his palm. He listened carefully, but there was no sound inside. No animals, no wind. He pulled once, and the door did not move. Rust cracked softly as he pulled again. With effort, the door opened just enough for him to step inside. Dust filled the air, and the smell of old hay mixed with damp earth. Light slipped through cracks in the roof, forming thin lines on the floor. The inside of the barn was larger than expected. Empty stalls lined the walls, and broken tools rested where hands had last left them many years ago. Tom walked slowly, careful where he stepped. Each sound echoed softly, making the space feel alive again. He saw ropes, barrels, and old harnesses hanging in place. Nothing looked used in a long time, yet nothing looked destroyed either. It felt like time had paused. Near the back of the barn, Tom noticed something unusual. The dirt floor there was uneven. Wooden boards were laid across it, different from the rest of the floor. Some boards were newer than others, placed with care. This was not random decay. Someone had done this on purpose. Tom knelt and touched the boards. They were firm but not sealed. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a mix of curiosity and concern. Before lifting anything, he stood and looked around again. That was when he saw markings on the wall. Faded symbols scratched into the wood, almost hidden by dust. Tom could not read them, but he felt their meaning was important. He stepped back, realizing this was not something he should face alone. He left the boards untouched and walked out of the barn, closing the door carefully behind him. That night, Tom told Mark what he saw. Mark listened closely, his face growing serious. He admitted that his uncle had once warned him that some truths change how people see the world. Mark had never understood that warning until now. The barn stood silent in the dark, holding its secret. Whatever was hidden beneath those boards had waited 50 years. And now, someone had finally found the courage to look inside. The next morning arrived slowly, as if the land itself was unsure about waking up. A thin mist lay over the fields, and the barn stood quietly in the distance. Mark did not sleep well that night. Tom's words stayed in his mind, especially the part about the boards on the floor and the faded markings on the wall. After breakfast, Mark and Tom walked together toward the barn. Neither of them spoke much. The sound of their boots on the ground felt louder than usual. As they got closer, Mark felt his chest tighten. He had lived on this land for months, yet this was the first time he felt like a guest on it. Tom opened the barn doors again. The same smell of old hay and dust greeted them. Light entered through the roof cracks, showing the stillness inside. Nothing had changed since the day before, but the feeling was different. The barn no longer felt asleep. It felt aware. They walked toward the back together. Mark noticed the uneven floor right away. The boards stood out clearly now that he knew to look for them. He also saw the faded markings on the wall. They were simple shapes, lines and circles, drawn carefully by hand. Mark asked Tom if he thought they meant anything. Tom said he did not know, but he believed they were signs, not decorations. Someone wanted to remember something, or maybe warn others. Mark nodded, feeling a quiet fear but also a strong need to understand. They decided to lift the boards together. Tom counted softly, and they pulled. The wood creaked but came loose. Beneath the boards was packed dirt, darker than the rest of the floor. It looked like it had been turned many times before being covered. Tom grabbed a shovel that leaned against the wall. It was old but still strong. He began digging slowly. Each movement revealed more dark soil. Mark watched closely, his hands shaking slightly. He did not know what he expected to find, but he knew it was something important. After some time, the shovel hit something solid. Tom stopped at once. He cleared the dirt by hand, careful and patient. A wooden surface appeared. It was a large box, made from thick planks and sealed tight. The wood was worn but not broken. Mark felt his breath slow. The box was real. Whatever his uncle had hidden was right in front of them. Tom checked the edges and found no lock, only heavy nails. Someone had sealed it with care, not fear. Together, they lifted the lid. It opened slowly, releasing a cold, dry air. Inside the box were objects wrapped in cloth. Tom reached in and unwrapped the first one. It was an old journal. The pages were yellow, but the writing was clear. Mark took the journal with trembling hands. He recognized the handwriting at once. It belonged to his uncle. The first page held a date from more than 50 years ago. Mark began to read aloud. The journal told the story of the land long before Mark was born. His uncle had not always lived alone. Years ago, several families worked this land together. They shared tools, animals, and dreams. The barn was once full of life, noise, and laughter. Then the journal spoke of a sudden change. A powerful storm had struck the area, destroying homes and crops. Many families left, but some stayed. They believed the land would recover. They believed in hard work and patience. One night after the storm, something unexpected happened. The ground near the barn collapsed, revealing a deep opening beneath it. The families worked together to explore it. They found an underground space, natural but shaped by time. Inside were signs of people who had lived there long before them. The journal described tools made of stone, simple drawings on walls, and signs of shelter. The people realized they had built their barn over a place of great age and meaning. They feared that others might come and take it, or destroy it without care. So they made a choice. They decided to protect it by hiding it. They filled the opening, sealed the floor, and marked the walls as a reminder. Over time, families moved away. Only Mark's uncle remained. The final pages of the journal were heavy with emotion. Mark's uncle wrote that he carried the responsibility alone for many years. He closed the barn to protect what lay beneath. He knew one day someone would need to decide its future. Mark closed the journal slowly. His hands were steady now, but his heart felt full. The barn was not hiding something dark. It was protecting a piece of history. Tom looked at Mark and nodded. He said that some places are not meant to be owned, only cared for. Mark agreed. He knew the barn was no longer just an old building. It was a bridge between the past and the present. They replaced the cloth over the box and closed it gently. The decision ahead was not simple, but it was clear. Whatever happened next would change the land forever. The barn felt different after the box was opened and the journal was read. The silence inside was no longer empty. It felt calm, like the place had been waiting to be understood. Mark and Tom stood for a long time without speaking. The light coming through the roof seemed warmer now, touching the old walls with care. Mark carried the journal back to the house. He read it again that evening, slowly, page by page. Each word felt like a message left just for him. His uncle had not been afraid. He had been patient. He believed the land would one day meet the right person. The next morning, Mark made a decision. He invited a small group of trusted people from the town. He chose those who respected history and land. There was a teacher named Paul, a farmer named Ben, and an older woman named Ruth who knew many stories of the area. They gathered outside the barn under a clear sky. Mark explained everything from the journal. He spoke about the underground space and the reason it was hidden. The group listened quietly. No one laughed. No one doubted him. They felt the weight of the truth. Tom led them inside. The barn doors opened wide, and sunlight filled the space. The group walked slowly, as if entering a place of respect. When they reached the back wall, Tom lifted the boards again. This time, there was no fear. Only care. They dug together, clearing soil gently. The wooden box was lifted aside, and beneath it, they found the sealed opening. Stones were packed tightly, placed by human hands long ago. It took time, but piece by piece, the stones were removed. A narrow opening appeared. Cool air flowed out, clean and steady. Tom lowered a light carefully and held it still. The glow revealed stone walls below, smooth in places, rough in others. Mark felt his breath catch. This was real. With ropes and steady steps, Tom went down first. The others followed slowly. The underground space was larger than expected. The ceiling arched naturally, and the walls held faint drawings. They showed animals, people, and simple symbols. They were old but clear. Ruth stepped closer to the wall. She did not touch it. She only looked. She said these drawings told stories of survival, movement, and care for the land. They were not signs of fear. They were signs of life. Paul examined the ground and tools left behind. He said the people who lived here long ago were careful and skilled. They used what they needed and left the rest untouched. This place was not hidden to trap anything. It was hidden to protect memory. Mark felt pride and humility at the same time. His uncle had guarded something valuable, not in money, but in meaning. The land was more than soil. It was a record of human life across time. They spent hours inside, documenting what they saw with care. No one removed anything. They agreed this place should be preserved, not owned. When they climbed back into the barn, the sun was already low. That evening, the group sat outside the barn. They talked about what to do next. Some suggested telling experts who could help protect the site. Others spoke about keeping it safe from careless attention. Mark listened to every thought. Tom spoke last. He said the land trusted Mark because Mark listened before acting. He said whatever choice Mark made should keep that trust alive. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle gently on his shoulders. Later that night, Mark stood alone near the barn. The wind moved softly through the fields. He placed his hand on the old wood and felt warmth instead of cold. The barn was no longer a mystery. It was a promise. Mark knew that the story of the barn would soon be shared with the world. But it would be shared with respect. The discovery had not changed the land by force. It had changed it by understanding. The past had been silent for 50 years. Now it had a voice again, and Mark was ready to listen. The days that followed were filled with careful planning. Mark did not rush into action. He remembered his uncle's words from the journal and Tom's advice about trust. This place had stayed safe for many years because people chose patience. Mark decided to follow the same path. He contacted a small group of experts who specialized in history and land preservation. He chose them carefully, sharing only what was needed. When they arrived, they did not bring heavy machines or loud tools. They brought notebooks, soft lights, and calm voices. Tom guided them to the barn and then to the opening beneath the floor. The experts moved slowly, showing respect at every step. They studied the drawings, the stone walls, and the tools left behind. They spoke in quiet tones, clearly moved by what they saw. One expert explained that the underground space was very old. It showed signs of careful living and deep connection to the land. Another said it was rare to find such a place untouched by modern damage. They all agreed that Mark's uncle had made the right choice by hiding it. Word of the discovery began to spread through the town, but Mark kept it controlled. He spoke openly at a town meeting, explaining the importance of protecting the site. He asked for cooperation instead of excitement. The people listened. Some were surprised. Others felt proud. Many had grown up hearing stories about the old barn, never knowing the truth. Now they understood why it had been closed for so long. The barn was not a place of fear. It was a place of care. With guidance from the experts, Mark made a plan. The underground space would be preserved and studied over time. The barn above it would be repaired, not to change its look, but to keep it standing strong. Everything would be done gently. Tom helped with the repairs. He replaced weak beams, fixed the roof, and strengthened the doors. Each piece of wood was treated with respect. The barn began to look alive again, not new, but steady and proud. As the work continued, Mark noticed a change in the land. Grass grew thicker near the barn. Birds returned to the roof. The place felt open, as if it approved of the care being given. Even the air seemed lighter. Visitors were allowed only in small numbers and only with guidance. They came not for excitement, but to learn. Teachers brought students. Elders shared stories. The barn became a place of quiet learning rather than noise. Tom often stood nearby, watching people enter and leave. He felt a deep sense of peace. He had opened the barn with his hands, but the true opening had happened in the hearts of the people. One evening, Mark and Tom sat outside the barn as the sun set. The sky turned soft colors, and the fields glowed. Mark thanked Tom for his courage and honesty. Tom said the land had done most of the work. He had only listened. Mark thought about how close he had been to ignoring the barn, to letting it decay. If he had chosen comfort over curiosity, the truth would have remained hidden. Instead, he had chosen care. The barn was no longer just a building. It was a shared responsibility. It reminded everyone that history lives quietly beneath their feet, waiting for respect. As night fell, the barn stood strong against the dark. It was open now, not in fear, but in trust. The change it brought was not loud or sudden. It was steady, deep, and lasting. Mark knew that one final step remained. The story of the barn needed to be passed on, not as a rumor, but as a lesson. A lesson about patience, respect, and the power of listening. The land had spoken at last, and the people had answered with care. The final step came quietly, just like everything else connected to the barn. Mark did not announce anything with big words or loud signs. He believed the place deserved calm respect, not attention driven by noise. So he chose a simple way to share the story. He worked with the town to create a small learning space near the barn. It was not a museum filled with glass cases. It was a place where people could sit, read, and understand. The story of the land, the barn, and the underground space was written in clear language so everyone could understand it. The journal of Mark's uncle became the heart of the story. Copies were made, while the original stayed protected. People learned how one man had carried responsibility for many years without praise. They learned how silence can sometimes be an act of care. Tom helped guide visitors when he could. He never acted like a hero. He simply explained what he saw and how he felt when he first opened the barn. He told people that courage does not always feel loud. Sometimes it feels like listening when it would be easier to walk away. Children visited with their teachers. They asked questions about the drawings on the walls and the people who once lived there. The teachers encouraged them to think about time, about how many lives can pass over one piece of land. The children listened closely, their eyes full of wonder. Elders from nearby areas came too. Some shared stories passed down through families, stories that now made more sense. They spoke about respect for land and how important it is to protect what cannot be replaced. These moments connected the past to the present in a powerful way. The barn itself became a symbol. It stood strong, repaired but unchanged in spirit. Its doors were open during the day and closed gently at night. It was no longer forgotten, but it was never taken for granted. Mark often walked the land alone in the early mornings. He felt different now. Not richer or more important, but more connected. He understood that ownership was not about control. It was about responsibility and care. One morning, Mark found himself standing where Tom had first placed his hand on the barn door. He imagined that moment again. He realized how one small decision had changed everything. If Tom had turned away, the story might have stayed buried forever. Tom eventually moved on to another ranch. Before leaving, he and Mark stood together near the barn. They did not say much. They did not need to. Both knew the land was in good hands now. As seasons passed, the barn continued to bring people together. Not crowds, but thoughtful visitors. Artists came to draw the structure. Writers came to sit quietly and think. Farmers came to rest and reflect. The barn offered space, not answers. Mark added a simple wooden sign near the entrance. It did not tell people what to think. It simply asked them to walk gently, speak softly, and remember that some places hold many lives at once. Years later, new families moved into the area. Children grew up knowing the barn not as a place of mystery, but as a place of meaning. They learned early that history is not always written in books. Sometimes it rests beneath old floors, waiting for care. The land healed in its own way. Fields stayed green. Animals returned. The balance felt right. Nothing was taken away. Something was added instead. Understanding. On quiet evenings, when the sun lowered and the wind moved across the fields, the barn stood peaceful and open. It no longer carried the weight of secrecy. It carried the strength of trust. The discovery inside had changed everything, not by causing fear or conflict, but by reminding people who they were and where they stood in time. The barn had waited 50 years, not for the right tools, but for the right hearts. And now, it finally rested.